Assalamu alaikum, kifkom. Welcome back to my channel. So today I have a video about parenting. Mother's Day is this week and I have a fast approaching due date, and it's got me thinking a lot about what it means to parent in Jordan and what it means to parent in a bicultural family when you're living inside one of those cultures. So these are just some observations that I've made over the years between British kids versus Jordanian kids and the differences in parenting styles. And of course, everything that I'm about to say is purely from my own experience. I know that not all Jordanian kids are like this, and I know that not all British kids are like this. I'm just talking about the kids that I know and the kids that I've seen, so no offense. So the first one that is very noticeable to me is sleep. In Jordan, I find that there's a lot more focus on co-sleeping, which surprised me a lot. I thought I was going to have some resistance about wanting to co-sleep because there's resistance back home in England. I just thought that there was that kind of old-fashioned child needs to be in its separate bed and separate room all the time, like there is in England. But actually one of the first things that I noticed when I was first here with these big family occasions and things, and it would get to kind of 11 p.m. at night and an uncle would turn up with all his family, and I'd be thinking, well, shouldn't the kids be in bed? It's really late. And then they wouldn't leave until like 1:30, and the children are just kind of getting on with it and doing their stuff and playing around, and they seem to be handling that just fine, whereas a British kid would be going into full meltdown because they have the boundaries of going to bed at certain times, and they have those things in place, those routines really strict in place. Whereas in Jordan, you don't change your life based on the child. You get on with your life and the child kind of fits around you. Ramadan's a really good example of that, because when we were living in Zerka, all the kids from the block would play football, all the boys would play football all night long in the street. But because it was Ramadan, because you fast all day, people tend to stay up later at night, that was just something that was okay in a way that is really hard still for me to get my head around. So that's very different to how it is in England, where you have a strict bedtime, you have a strict nap time as well. And typically they will sleep in their own bed from an early age or immediately. Some people put them in the cot from day one in a different room. Although there is more of a trend nowadays for co-sleeping and things like that. Another thing is food. There's a lot of focus, I find, from foreigners here, myself included, on the amount of sugar that children are allowed. So children here are allowed sweeties, and they're allowed to drink soda and Coke and Pepsi and things like that from a very early age, whereas in England that is a huge no-no. It's really not allowed. So that's something that's different, and that often gets me, I end up getting hung up on that oh, Jordanian kids are just allowed to put any old crap in their bodies. But actually, when you start thinking about it, Jordanian families don't cook a separate meal for the child. If you're having a rich meal with meat and with rice and a strong sauce and salad and all of those kind of more grown-up tastes, the child will still eat it. The child doesn't get a separate meal. Whereas in England, we'll make one meal at dinner time for the parents, and there'll be like a tea time for the children earlier on, of like chicken nuggets and chips or beans on toast. It's kind of, you have to find the balance there, because that's really unhealthy food that these kids are running on. And yeah, the sweets are really unhealthy as well. The third one is behaviour. So in England, we've got a lot of focus on creating very well behaved, good little children. And in Jordan, I feel like there's a lot more focus on letting the child be a child. So here, there's a lot less focus on manners. Or it's not like that there's less focus, but it's a different kind of focus. So when I first got here, I remember being really upset that a child had pushed past me in a queue, and I said to my husband, like, what's he doing? How, like, respect for your elders, respect for the queue, where's the respect? This is really rude. And he was like, he's a child? Of course he can go in front of you. He's a child. That was my first kind of introduction to it. And I often hear this phrase, like, it's a child. What's wrong with you? Whereas in England, we're completely the opposite. So the elder and the adult has got rights over everything and is the priority all the time, whereas here the child is the priority. In England, we have a history of children should be seen but not heard from like the Victorian era, and that's just part of our culture and it's part of our history, and you can't escape from that. So even though we don't practice that expression anymore and that parenting method anymore, there's definitely elements of that in our society. So children from an early age are taught to be quite respectful and quiet, and signs of a good child are respecting their elders, being very polite, lots of pleases and thank yous. And I think that there's so much emphasis put on that sometimes they can become quite clamped up and quite stressed, quite reserved as well. Jordanian kids on the whole are not reserved at all. They are very free, they are very much themselves, and they are very confident in themselves. And I think a lot of that is because there isn't as much intervention from the parents. For example, when you're at a family occasion, the children all just go off by themselves in a pack, and usually there is one girl that will assert herself as the mother figure, and there's a boy that will assert himself as like the alpha male, and they work their problems out on their own. They don't come back every 5 minutes to say, oh, he kicked me, or he did that, or she did this. They just deal with stuff on their own. They can self-monitor in a different way that I think we lack in England. We're very much wrapping our children up in cotton wool, whereas here they have a lot more freedom, they learn a lot more, they're a lot more responsible in different ways. So when I came here and I saw the children self-regulating and kind of getting on with things on their own independently, I was like, okay, that's something that I really love, and that's one of the reasons why I knew that I wanted to raise a child here. So now when I see my son running around in a pack with the rest of the Jordanian kids and he's completely integrated and he's just going off and doing his own thing, I feel full of pride that I have been able to give that to him here, in ways that maybe I wouldn't have been able to in England. Also, I feel like British parents tend to put too much focus on protecting their children emotionally and hiding them from negative emotions. For instance, in England, a child generally won't go to a funeral. And also you wouldn't take them to a wedding. Often children aren't invited to weddings. Like in Jordan, the family, you come as a whole family. You're not an individual. You have your entire family and you go everywhere with that family, to weddings and to funerals as well. So children are exposed to negative emotions like grieving and loss. And as well, in England, for instance, there's a lot of focus on not letting children see you argue. And while I agree that we should protect our children from aggressive emotion, we should also parent authentically. And if we're having negative emotions, I don't feel like we should be hiding those from our children. So yeah, as a whole, I would say that Jordanian children tend to be more confident, more self-assured, have less problems with things like depression or self-doubt than British children do. And on the other side of that as well, I put a lot of focus on trying to find boundaries and set routines and things and create the stability that I feel like children also need. So I hope that you enjoyed my video. I've got the sun like blazing down in my face, so I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. But if you enjoyed, please like, comment, subscribe, let me know that you're out there. And I will be back next week with another video about the springtime, because I complained about the weather in my last video. Thanks, bye, ma salama.